This might not look like your typical African cichlid aquarium, especially a Lake Tanganyika. However, if we were to remove all the plants and the vines, it then becomes an African tank. I've added in all of these plants and vines just to give it a little bit more character, give it a little bit more foliage and color, plus all of this Anubias of various sizes will help in water management. The fish we're adding to this, you're going to be surprised. Before we add any fish, I like to do a water change first. The fish we're adding, we already have. You guys know we're tearing down this fish room, and we're almost done. However, there's two types of fish that are going in this today. One of them are my African shell dwellers. You'll notice most of their sand has been removed. I've taken it out and added it to their new aquarium. First things first though, we need to shut off their filter, and I know everything's a mess down here, but that's what happens when you tear a fish room apart. They do have an overhead Timu filter, and we'll address that once we move the fish. Moving shell dwellers is incredibly simple. I'm just going to fill a bucket up with water and then start grabbing the shells. Most of the fish will dart into the shells anyway, so you can kind of move them with their homes. They're called shell dwellers because they spend 90% of their life inside of them, only coming out to meet new mates and find food. For the most part though, they breed, rest, and find shelter within these shells. If you want to have African shell dwellers, you need to have shells. These are just large escargot shells that I got on Amazon. You can simply search XL escargot snail shells and they should come up. You should get around 20 to 40 of them for like 20 bucks. They're not that expensive, but they sell out all the time. The reason I have so many shells is because typically speaking, you want around 5 shells per fish. They like to build their homes, they like to bury the shells, they like to have their own territories, etc. I move my hand throughout the tank, waving my hands through the water just to try to scare any stragglers back into the shells. Not all of them went in, and I'll have to address those little guys in a second. Just because I threw them into the bucket of water doesn't mean they're ready to go. We want them to sink. Shells will hold air if they're not put upside down, so you kind of want to go back and dump the shells upside down just in case there's no water in the pockets of the shell for the fish to survive. This is important because you don't want to dry your fish out, obviously. To catch the last little guys, we'll use a little net. Luckily, shell dwellers aren't that fast. They're just really small, one of the world's smallest cichlids. We'll be moving adults here, and this is a nice colony to populate a 180-gallon aquarium. Right now, they're just in a 50-gallon low boy tank. I do plan to get more shell dwellers from a different source just to diversify the genetics within the aquarium. Shell dwellers will breed, and they'll breed again and again and again. Sometimes they'll breed immediately, sometimes it could take a year or two. These guys' lifespans typically are only up to about 3 to 5 years though, and a well-established aquarium with a small grain sand and lots of shells is literally all they need. Incredibly fascinating and interesting fish to have. Before we add them to the aquarium though, we gotta shut the filter down. The overhead filter has some plastic bio balls and some large ceramic media. The bio balls I'm not so concerned about, it's mostly that ceramic media. This is like gold to me. Cycled media is worth its weight in gold. It allows me to start up aquariums immediately and to adjust the bio load in any aquarium without having to worry about any ammonia spikes. However, this tank already has a filter running, so I'm going to put it in my 180-gallon sump where the aquarium's already established just to keep that bacteria alive. We'll come back and use that another time. Now to add the fish in. You can add them all in one place, but my idea for this aquarium was to kind of sprinkle them throughout the entire aquarium. Just essentially grabbing handfuls at a time and kind of dropping them in, making sure they sink. However, once you take them out of water and try to drop them in, a lot of them unfortunately are going to soak, so you not only want to turn them over, but you want to kind of rotate them around as well, because inside of the shell is a spiral, so you're going to want to turn it around in a few different ways to make sure you're getting all of those air pockets out. With air pockets still in it, a lot of the times the fish don't even use them, so you want them completely void of air. And you want to put them all over the place. There's going to be dominant males all over this aquarium, and you want them to have options and places to hide. And if they're out exploring for food, you also want them to have other snail shells to kind of hide in case the predators that are going in this aquarium with them might go after them. Fortunately though, the predators we'll be adding don't really eat other small fish. They're more of a vegetarian. And one of the most terrifying fish in Lake Tanganyika to keep. The fish we're adding are Tropheus. I've already drained their 180-gallon aquarium, and we've got approximately 30 or 35 of them left to move over. These are Tropheus Bemba and Icola. These guys get to about 3 to 5 inches, but the ones that I've chosen, the Icola get this turned completely black with a massive yellow bar running horizontally through the middle of their body, whereas the Bemba get an orange to red stripe. So they should be fine. Will they breed or will they intermix? Unfortunately, they will, but that will probably take some time. And because I have so many of these, the babies might not make it in the tank simply due to competition and not necessarily a part of their diet. I love Tropheus for a simple reason. They all have the same body shape, or basically the same body shape, but it's one of the only fish in the world that there are over 200 naturally occurring variations of color. They're absolutely amazing. You want one with stripes? You got it. You want them to have blue on their face and one stripe? You got it. You want dots? You got it. You have absolutely every choice you could possibly imagine out of these fish. Plus, they're incredibly active. The downsides, well, they can be aggressive towards each other, so you definitely want to start off with a group of around a dozen. And a dozen is going to need a relatively large tank, like a 75-gallon. The more the merrier with these guys, as it does dilute that aggression, meaning that one fish can't be singled out as easily by everybody else. So if you get the right number, your chances of survival are incredibly high. The downside, well, they do have a pretty specific diet, relying heavily on a herbivoric based diet. For me, I don't really adhere to that. I've never had any type of bloat with these guys or any type of dietary issues with them. My biggest problem is literally what we're doing now. Every time I move Tropheus, I sometimes have a massive die-off. The reason being is there is at times where the water parameters don't match identically. These guys can be pretty sensitive to dramatic changes in water parameters. It doesn't mean that they need pristine water all the time, because they can adapt to kind of bad water per se. But if you do a massive water change and those parameters change immediately, or even the temperature, they tend to, kick the bucket, so to say. So my main goal is to take water from their aquarium, which has been water changed as well, and the parameters and even kind of the decorations, the filtration, everything is matching in their new aquarium, but most importantly the temperature, because I'm just going to be dumping these guys in. Now initially, once they are added into the aquarium, you'll notice that they all kind of look the same. They're all relatively different sizes. I think they're going to do much better in this aquarium because there's just so many more areas and more cover for them to kind of hide and dart around. But you'll notice that they also look fantastic with those snail shells. Even if I didn't have shell dwellers in this aquarium, I think the shells just fit the environment. While Anubias isn't going to occur naturally in Lake Tanganyika, it certainly is a plant that does well with Tropheus. Tropheus can eat the plants. They are a herbivore. You typically don't see planted tanks within the African lakes. However, Anubias, Java fern, and mosses are usually used because a lot of fish, most fish, simply don't eat them. Now, believe it or not, the only fish that I've ever had that does eat Anubias are my piranha. For some reason, they love eating Anubias. Maybe they're tired of their diet. Now, it's really difficult to see what variation of Tropheus we have because they're not really reached adult size, and that's one of the best parts about Tropheus as well, is you don't have the same fish forever. They kind of go through a metamorphosis, where as babies and adolescents, they look absolutely terrible, unless you're keeping Duboisi, which start out with black body and white dots and then develop a white or yellow stripe down their body, blue face. But you can kind of see which ones are probably going to end up as which ones, because some of them are dark and orangish red, while others are, dark and kind of yellowish. Very, very cool. This is a big transition moment for these guys in terms of their coloration, and they definitely seem far more active in this aquarium than any aquarium they've been in thus far. So for diet, for me, I feed them a variation of foods from frozen foods. I go very light on frozen foods, maybe once a week, and I'm talking brine shrimp and that type of thing. From there, I never really feed bloodworms because the skin on a bloodworm is incredibly difficult for smaller fish to digest, especially. It's more of a treat, but you don't want to eat treats all the time. So these guys will get stuff from cichlid flakes, cichlid pellets, you name the brand and the ingredients. They're all kind of similar, but then they'll also get a heavier dose of algae flakes and algae pellets type of thing where it's more herbivoric based. You'll notice that they don't go after or bother the shell dwellers at all. The shell dwellers could come out whenever they want and go in their shells whenever they want. Even during feeding, it's the same thing. Now, how this tank will look in 6 months will be dramatically different. You won't recognize the fish, nor will you recognize these plants. The plants will definitely fill out the tank, and these fish are going to reach their adult coloration. The colony of shell dwellers should also explode in this tank, but we'll see long term. I suspect in the next 3 months, the shell dwelling colony will double to triple, whereas the plants will as well, and followed by the Tropheus finally reaching some of their adult coloration. Now, do I suggest you get Tropheus? Well, obviously I would love to see you have some Tropheus or even shell dwellers. Shell dwellers are great for even a 10-gallon tank. Put a few shells in there and some sand and a handful of these guys, and you got one of the most interesting aquariums in the aquarium hobby. However, when it comes to the Tropheus, well, they're expensive, usually costing anywhere from $20 to $40 a piece, and you gotta start with around 10 to 12 of them. Otherwise, well, you could get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, and you see that work sometimes in other aquariums where there's tons and tons of fish, but if you want to have a true Tropheus tank, you need to start with at least 12 is what I'd say. Now, at that price point of $20 to $40, you're now looking at $240 to $480 for a group of fish. Now, you can only imagine what my 30 plus cost. Now, you guys know I've kept African cichlids for a long time, but one of my first African cichlid tanks was a Tropheus tank. I've always loved them, I always want them, and I always kind of come back to them. Even though we've seen them on the channel before, and, you know, seeing the same thing over and over again is kind of boring, and I like to introduce you into new fish, but a part of me and my hobby has to exist on this channel as well. I would definitely say that Tropheus is my favorite African cichlid. Yes, that's out of anything out of Lake Malawi. That's even the king of Lake Tanganyika. Most people think them as the Frontosa. But something has to be said about these little guys that are incredibly active, incredibly cute, with their little snouts on them. Over 200 naturally occurring color variations, not man-made like you'll see in the hobby, and literally one of the only cichlid species that has that many true variations that are so big in contrast of those variations. Now, the interesting thing is this tank is run by a large canister filter, and then a smaller canister filter pumps water from the 180-gallon aquarium that they're in right now, which is 6 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 2 feet tall, and it pumps the water up to another couple of 4-foot-long tanks. Both of those are planted, and I'm thinking about adding CO2 to this entire system just to make sure the plants explode in growth, and then slowly dwindle it back around 3 months later. However, this is a 180-gallon system, and the tanks above them are each approximately 55 gallons each, and then obviously the canister filters alone probably hold 10 gallons, so this is probably a 300-gallon system. Water changes are weekly or whenever I feel like it, and I'll do approximately 50% of the 180. If I do a 50% on the 180, it's basically a 50%, it's basically a 30 to 40% water change on the entire system. When I feed them, I just put some flakes or pellets into the flow of the output of the filter, and it blows the flakes or pellets or whatever I'm feeding throughout the entire aquarium, giving everybody in it a chance to get some food. You definitely don't want to feed in one place because not all of your fish are going to be dominant or strong enough to get all of that food. But we will see that the shell dwellers and the Tropheus are doing really well together, coming out together, even the shell dwellers going mid-water, which is typically not all that common, but we'll see what happens and what this tank looks like in a month or two. when we do our next update on it. I can say that this tank has been running now for a couple of weeks, just as it is, and it's just as successful as the day I set it up. So we'll see what happens long term. I'm incredibly excited about this tank, then I think you guys will be as well. But if you were ever thinking about trying to get into Tropheus, for example, my suggestion would be pick the color variation that you like the most and try to find them. You're never going to be able to try to find all of the variations, but you certainly can find something you like and then find something similar to it at your local fish store, and I wish you the best of luck. But if you enjoyed this video, you want to see me do more of these kind of voiceover setup videos, let me know in the comments section below. Hope you enjoyed this one though. If you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.